I'm grateful, and I would like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Westminster North, for securing this debate, and it's an honour to serve under your chairmanship. I do apologise for arriving a little late, but nevertheless, I think this is a really important and timely debate. My honourable friend has done some steadfast work advocating for the rights of tenants, and I think that should be recognised on all sides of the House. She certainly has my unwavering support in the campaign for all homes to be fit for human habitation. The government's failure to support the Homes Fit for Human Habitation Bill in 2015, or back a similar amendment to the Housing and Planning Bill, was a bill I actually served on, Mr Hollowborn, as an opposition whip a year later, shows the scale of the challenge we face on this side of the House. I believe we have a flawed system that, as my honourable friend has indicated, is completely lacking in balance. The housing security enjoyed by the post-war generation has been eroded systematically, partially through the right to buy, partially through the failure to build truly affordable, low-rent social housing, and the boom in the buy-to-let sector. And it's moved many tenants from housing security to housing insecurity in the private sector. That the right to buy, coupled with the failure to build, has created, as my honourable friend indicated, generation rent. And it's our children that are paying the price, financially excluded, with home ownership for many just a distant dream. Their reality is insecurity, relatively high-cost private rents, with few enforceable rights. So I really think we must address this issue of tenants' rights. The private rented sector has increased substantially, even within my time in this House. Housing just about 9% of households in 1988. Today, the private rented sector has more than doubled and accommodates 1 in 5 households. So clearly, Section 1 of the Housing Act and no-fault evictions creates, or in fact adds to, a one-sided power imbalance, with landlords having practical rights while tenants have what are in effect unenforceable paper rights. So this power imbalance encourages poor management practice, with tenants worried about challenging rent rises and afraid often to ask for essential repairs for the fear of eviction. My honourable friend, and I'm grateful to her, my honourable friend for Westminster North, circulated a briefing paper in advance of the debate, which notes that there were 12,711 evictions by bailiffs under Section 1, and that was recorded by the Ministry of Justice under the accelerated procedure. However, this is a baseline. It's really the tip of the iceberg, with the vast majority of tenants actually moving out without going through the daunting court process. I want to mention some of the issues in my constituency, Mr Hollowborn, which are different to those in the inner city areas in London, but are very real and in some respects probably more acute. In my constituency, I've seen constituents move from one bad landlord to another, from one dilapidated house to another. It's a never-ending cycle of debt and disruption that traps families in poverty, and no matter how hard they try to escape, they seem as if they're caught in this vicious circle. I do hope the Minister is aware of hoarding in my constituency. I've raised the problems there with the private rented sector on a number of occasions, and indeed I did invite the Northern Powerhouse Minister to visit, and he did promise he would do so, but without success so far. I've also written to the Housing Minister, the Honourable Member for North West Hampshire, inviting him to visit and discuss some of the particular problems that we have and how they may be addressed. If I might, without going into too much detail, if I might just mention that some of the problems arise from the withdrawal of accent housing and subsequently the fire sale auction of houses in Hordern that led to an influx of absentee landlords with little interest in their tenants. And we talked a little earlier about the tale of landlords who are not acting in a socially responsible manner. and it's certainly evident in some of the former mining communities that I represent in East Durham. And many people now find themselves living amongst derelict houses, dilapidated housing, smashed windows, arson, fly tipping. That's the epitaph to a failed private rented sector market in Hordern in my constituency. And frankly, it's nothing short of a national housing scandal. And I do hope that the government are going to engage, because we can't sit by passively and see this continue. So I do hope the Minister and her colleagues will prove me wrong. I would like to say that my own local authority, Durham County Council, are nearing the publication of a Hordern master plan, and that addresses some of the issues of the private sector, and it will set out a range of options that hopefully, if we can work together with them, will help to deliver some housing regeneration. But there's still a need for ministers to engage and support the proposal with appropriate funding, because what we have is an influx of absentee landlords, poor housing conditions, the exploitation of tenants, and I'm glad that my local authority is now seeking to challenge this. I am told it isn't a formality to get an authority-wide landlord licensing scheme. I actually thought it was, but I understand the government have some reservations about that. And the minister's shaking her head, but can I just say that it has proven to be effective where we've had a landlord licensing scheme over a small defined area, but all that it's done is simply push the problem to another area. So the consensus is, and it's worked in, I believe, in Liverpool and in Newham in London. It's worked very effectively, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend who's hosted visits from local elected representatives. I will.
That we had very fruitful discussions with a government minister over the issue of the need for a private sector blanket ban in Newham. The only bit it doesn't currently cover is the new build in the Olympic Village. So that's meant that it hasn't been anywhere else in Newham for people effectively to fly to in order to make, for those conditions to get worse. We had a very effective conversation with the government. I urge the honourable gentleman to keep pushing at it, because it has meant a real difference to tenants in my constituency.
I'm grateful for that. That's really helpful, and I do think it will make a difference, and we will keep pushing at it. It's not our intention to have a blanket ban on private landlords, but we simply want to have a scheme that the absentee private landlords will behave in a reasonable fashion and behave in a reasonable fashion towards their tenants. So in conclusion, Mr Hollowborn, I support the abolition of Section 21. I believe this will strengthen tenants' rights. However, until we address the wider housing crisis, for example, building a new generation of social housing in the numbers that we did in the 1960s and 70s, the national housing crisis will worsen. And I actually saw some figures recently where as many as 40% of the council houses that were originally built are now in the hands of private landlords, and the rents are on average double what they were when they were in the social sector. Our children will be burdened with higher rents or unmanageable mortgage debt, and will live in insecurity, worried of reporting repairs or poor housing conditions for fear of eviction. So our communities will also be burdened, particularly those in villages like Hordern in my constituency, mismanaged by absentee private landlords, those whose interests seem to lie in quick profits rather than in engaging to make a sustainable community. So I do hope the Minister will listen to the concerns of my constituents and members on all sides of the House, and take time to look at this and consider how to help to transform and regenerate not only housing but the life opportunities of many people, including those in the communities of Hordern and East Durham that I represent.